All right, gang. So today we're going to teach you a little bit about how to get set up to make a pen on the wood lathe. And so what you're going to receive is a bag here. And inside the bag, there are a bunch of different parts for making your pen. The only thing you need right away is the two brass tubes. And so I'm going to fetch those out of here. A couple things to be careful about. When you pull your brass tubes out of here, inside of there's an ink cartridge. These ink cartridges are very delicate. Don't put the kit in your pocket or in your hoodie. Make sure, if I were you, I would take this. I would grab a Sharpie. I will have one laying around the shop. I would write your name on it. And if you just put your last name, that's good enough. Put your name on it. Put it in your shop locker so you don't lose this. Last year, 1/3 of students lost their parts to their pen before they put their pen together. So we don't want that to happen. So that's going to go into my shop locker over here, and I'll show you what's next. So the way these pens work is we're going to take a block of wood. We're going to drill a hole through the center of it. This block of wood just happens to be the exact same length as the pen tube itself, the brass tubes. So we're going to show you the process by which we drill these out, and then by the next step, which is sanding and reaming those tubes so that they're ready to go. All right. So the first step is we're going to take 2 blocks of wood. We're going to go over to the drill press, and I'm going to show you how to center and drill the middle of your blocks. So now I'm over at the drill press, and I built this little jig. It's basically a wood clamp that I glued to a piece of plywood, and I cut a square out of it. And the way this is going to work, it's a very simple setup, is we're going to take our blocks of wood, and you can see I've drilled one. And what I did is I put a cross on there so I knew where the center was. And the easiest way to make the cross is if you lay your extra block of wood from corner to corner and draw yourself an X using a pencil, and then rotate it, and again go corner to corner. You should end up with an X that represents pretty close to the center of the block. So I'm going to go ahead and stick the block in there, and I need to make sure that when I tighten this down that the back of the clamp itself is even, because if it isn't, if it's not flush across, let me show this, if it's not flush across the back here, then it's not truly straight up and down when you tighten it up. So we want to make sure that's in there nice and straight, and that looks pretty good. Next thing I need to do is let me grab a drill bit. So what I have here is a 7mm drill bit. These are a little different than the rest of the drill bits because it's metric. So I'm going to loosen this up. I'm going to drop this down. I'm going to open the chuck enough to hold the drill bit. Good. Tighten up the chuck with the chuck key, which I never leave in the chuck. It's a bad idea. And before you do this, make sure you have watched the drill press video. All right, so now I have my, let me lock the table in place. I have my block of wood centered inside my chip there. And so what I'm gonna do is, this is what's gonna secure our block. We're gonna turn this on, and I'm gonna do the best I can to get that centered. Now, the good news is it can be off a little bit and still be okay. So I'm going to go down a little bit. Notice where my left hand is. That's so that when I lift the drill press back up, the vise doesn't come up. Let me lower that down just a little bit more for you. You might be able to see better. So I'll leave my left hand here so that when I bring those chips up, and what you're hearing is harmonics. That's the vibration. Uh-oh. Let's try this again. A little tighter. We're going to go down. I've drilled all the way through it, and I can tell that because I can hear it. Change tone. All right. And so you can see, I didn't do a very good job on this one. See how it's centered there, but not there. And that happens. So instead of worrying about it, we're going to try it again. And this time, I'm going to do a better job, make sure I get that block in there nice and straight. Let me see if I have another block handy here. Oh, look at this, I do. So I'm just going to grab another block. I'm going to put an X on it real quick. And we're going to give this a second shot. And like I said, it doesn't have to be perfect. That's the good news. And the bad news is sometimes you have to do this a couple times. I also tend to make my blocks a little bit bigger than they need to be. And by doing that, if you make your blocks bigger, they don't have to be perfectly centered and they still work. So that's very interesting, the way it's almost like there's something in there. Let's see if this will tighten down better now. Okay, that looks good. Okay, let's see if this works. Lights on, power on. Can hold this down in front. Just gonna eyeball that the best I can. Just gonna go up and down until I get all the way through the block. Okay. Oh, there we go. Close enough. That'll work. So now I have my blocks. Let's shoot back over to the workbench. All right, so I'm back over at the workbench. And the first thing I'm going to do is I got a piece of notebook paper here. And that's just a scratch piece of notebook paper. And I have a little piece of sandpaper here. I'm going to just use a piece of it. And the first thing I'm going to do is take these brass tubes. And when they extrude these brass tubes, they have a little bit of oil on them. And they're super smooth. And smooth, oily tubes that are going to get glued into a block of wood don't work so well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, and I'm just going to sand those brass tubes so they have a little bit of bite. And what I mean by bite is if you could put this underneath a microscope, those scratches would look more like mountains and valleys. And that glue hopefully will sit down in those mountains and valleys and help it bond better inside your tube. So you notice I'm sanding this way, the long way, and I'm going to work my way around. And this doesn't take a ton of time, but spend a minute, sand them both really, really well. And you kind of see the difference between the sanded and the non-sanded one. One is dull and one is still shiny. So I'm going to sand these real well. Okay. And sand those down real good. And again, there's no rush, so take your time doing this. And people do it different ways. Whatever works for you. But we want to make sure we get the oil off and we get some nice bite on there, scratches on there. It'll work pretty well, okay? All right, so once I get them all sanded down and they look real good, we're about ready to take a little bit of, I like to use, let's see, what my best two tubes are this one and this one. So if you have one that doesn't turn out very well, make sure you put it in the trash so it doesn't accidentally get used by someone. Okay, so I'm going to throw that in the trash. I tend to use Gorilla Glue. We've used Gorilla Glue at Evergreen Middle School for years. We've tried CA glue or super glue. And if a kid leaves the lid off of it or leaves it on its side, it's expensive. We get fingers stuck together. We have had really good luck with Gorilla Glue. So we're going to use Gorilla Glue. Gorilla Glue, we need 4 things. We need our wood blocks. We need our brass tubes. We need our Gorilla Glue with a lid that we can get off. So before you start, make sure you can get that off. If not, come see me and I'll help you get it off. And the 4th thing we need is a little bit of water. So Gorilla Glue is the kind of glue that when, if we dampen the inside of these tubes, when the glue comes in contact, that's going to activate that glue and it's going to expand and push more on those brass tubes, holding them in place much better. So we need a little bit of water. So over here I have a bottle. At school, I just take the blocks of wood over to the drinking fountain. But here in my shop, I don't have a sink. So I have a little bottle of water. I turn quite a bit of pens, so this works out really well. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my 2 blocks. I'm going to put my fingers over the bottom. I'm just going to fill this with water. Okay, I'm going to pour that water out into my trash can, and that's plenty of moisture for those blocks to bond. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my Gorilla Glue, and you have to be pretty well organized. Don't get these blocks wet until everything is sanded and you're ready to go, because if you don't, if you have to then sand everything, what's happening to that wood as we speak is it is swelling shut in there. So that's a lot of glue, right? So we just want to make sure we keep it spinning so we don't drip anywhere. I have a piece of scratch paper here. I'm going to stick this in there. I'm going to slide down. I'm twisting it as I go. I'm going to twist that, twist it. And when I get really close, I just take and spin and push down. And then I like to smear a little bit. And what that smear does is it helps pull any glue that got in the tube back out. So there's one that is finished. I'm going to try to scrape up a little bit of that glue so it's not quite so wasteful. But I'd rather waste just a little bit of glue than have a pen, the brass tube, break loose in there, okay? Glue on the big picture is relatively inexpensive. And so we're going to spin this around a little bit. You get in there, and again, what I'm doing is twisting as I go down, and you can see we get pretty good adhesion. It sticks to that pipe or that tube pretty well. So I'm going to keep going. Don't get this on your hands. Gorilla Glue will turn brown on your hands and look dirty and gross for a day or two, and people hate that. So what I'm going to do is I got my pens glued. I'm going to fold this in half to cover up all that glue and water. I'm going to place these on here. Notice I place them a couple inches apart. And then on this piece of paper, I'm going to write my name. And I'm going to place this entire thing in my shop locker. Couple things. I placed them far apart because what's going to happen is as that glue expands, it's going to foam up and come out of the end of the tube like this. And it will also come out onto the table and onto the paper. So if it's on the paper, you're covered, you're in good shape. If you just throw these in your locker, it's going to weld them to the bottom of your locker. And by the time we chisel them off, unfortunately, usually it turns your pen kit into trash. So we're going to set this in our locker. We're going to let it sit there for a minimum of 24 hours. Okay. So once we have those and they are dry at least 24 hours, then we're going to take our blocks. This is a block set that I did yesterday. So you notice the glue is all foamy and hard on the ends here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sand the ends of these just to get rid of the foam. Okay. And so when I go over to the belt sander, it's literally going to be zzz, zzz, and then the other side, zzz, zzz, and you're going to do the 4 of them. It doesn't take very long. You do not want to change the length of these blocks of wood by very much. Okay. So I'll see you at the belt sander. All right, so we're over at my belt sander. It's a small one, but this does everything I need to do at home. So I'm going to turn it on, and on the downhill side of the disc, I'm going to come in here and sand. All I'm doing is sanding that foam off the ends of them. Good. I'm going to do this one. And now I can see the end of the brass tubes, so we're good to go. I'm going to shut this off. All right, so now I'm back at the bench, and I'm ready to ream these out. So I have a double reamer in here. So there is a sharp cutter on the end here, and a sharp cutter on the end here. So you want to make sure you're super careful doing this. And so what I like to do is I like to just see if I can slowly feed it in, and it will cut the glue out of the way. And what the first cutter is doing is it's cutting the glue out of the center of the tube. The second reamer is going to cut the end of the tubes perpendicular to the tube itself. Okay? So I'm going to come in here, and notice it leaves a little ring of wood that you can see where it's cut everything. That means it's perpendicular. So I'm going to come in the other way. Good. Now we're going to do this one. Remember what I said, we don't want to change the length of that brass tube substantially, so don't overdo it here, or else you're not going to have enough material to make a pen. All right? So now I have 2 blocks of wood, and I'm ready to set them up on a mandrel. This is a mandrel, and I will show you how to make a pen. We're now, our materials are here, we're ready to rock and roll. All right, thanks for watching. We'll see you on how to turn a pen.